Next on CyberCrime.
I am happy that I now have the opportunity to prove my innocence without being detained.
Police raid a Manila, Philippines apartment in search of the love bug suspect. But who is the author of the virus, and how do investigators track down this type of cyber criminal?
Plus, is the internet making it easier for someone to steal your identity? We have one woman's story you won't want to miss.
CyberCrime is brought to you by Symantec.
Hey, welcome to CyberCrime. We got a lot of stuff to tell you about again this week. A couple of suspects are named in the love bug case. Business and law enforcement leaders joined together in an effort to fight cybercrime, and Napster bans thousands of users. Here's Alex with our top story.
Thank you, Luke. Next week, David Smith is scheduled to be sentenced for writing and distributing the Melissa virus. It wasn't so long ago that Smith was apprehended at his brother's home in New Jersey. The manhunt lasted a matter of a week. Now, in the case of the love bug, like Melissa, some of the best tips are coming from the private sector, and the best leads from the virus code itself.
The love bug virus itself provided a lot of clues about where it came from.
You can start by looking at the second word in the script, Baroque, the password-stealing part of the love bug worm. Now, who better to walk us through the code than Richard Smith, the internet sleuth that ID'd the Melissa virus writer David Smith 3 days before he was arrested. With Melissa, the ISP had logs that led right back to Smith's home.
And it looks like a similar thing happened here with love bug, that the author in this case had called from his house to upload this Baroque piece of the love bug, and caller ID was turned on also at that internet service provider. But that doesn't tell us, who in the apartment uploaded it.
Whoever it was, investigators are convinced this is the apartment in the Philippines. Late this week, investigators shifted their attention to their primary suspect, Onel de Guzman. His sister Irene, on the right, owns the apartment. But at a news conference Thursday, Onel de Guzman, speaking mostly through his attorney, wouldn't say directly whether he released the virus.
He is not really aware whether or not the acts imputed to him were indeed done by him. But he admits that he has been using the internet extensively.
But Smith says many of the virus clues point directly to Onel de Guzman.
Well, it says we're dealing with a student, a current or recent student.
In fact, de Guzman dropped out of the AMA Computer College in Manila shortly after the school disapproved his thesis, a thesis that closely resembled the love bug worm itself.
From the data that we have, shows clearly that the signs of the virus, its symptoms, is what is very related to what our student may have done.
This is illegal, faculty members wrote. The spider email address also points to de Guzman.
A valid email address is a good tip, too, because you can go and look to see, well, who set this account up? What was their IP address? Did they leave any personally identifiable information behind when they set up the account, not realizing later that they were going to use the mail account for sending out a virus?
And then there's this virus, written earlier this year by Michael Buen, posted on the Filipino virus website PHVX. It doesn't work like the love bug, but the code offers many clues to the investigation.
One is it says Grammarsoft in it, so this is the only other reference that anybody has found to the Grammarsoft virus writing group. And secondly, it mentions Onel de Guzman's name in it.
And the de Guzman home remains at the center of the investigation. On Monday, authorities arrested one resident, Romel Ramones, seizing some computer equipment but no computer itself. Ramones was released the next day when a 3-judge panel concluded there was not enough evidence to hold him.
I view my temporary release a victory of sorts, and I am confident that a thorough investigation will result in my full vindication.
Ramones still faces charges and a hearing in 10 days.
As I mentioned, David Smith will be sentenced next week. The maximum sentence he can receive is 5 years. and you have to wonder whether he'll receive the maximum in light of the love bug's damage. In fact, when it comes to damage, we want to know, did you get bitten by the bug, and if so, how bad did it hurt? Pick A. If you did get burned by the bug, yep, love hurts. If you didn't get bit but you're still worried, pick B, because, you know, you can't hurry love. It could strike at any time. Maybe you're confident you'll never get the bug, and you're loving every minute of it. That is C. Or perhaps D. You don't know whether you've been bitten because what's love got to do with it? Give us your feedback at cybercrime.com, and be sure to post your opinions on our news bulletin board. If you're worried about getting the love bug, our security scanner can help. You can find it at the top right-hand side of the web page. Our scanner can check your computer for the top 5 viruses, which of course now includes the love bug, its variants, and others like Pretty Parts and CIH. Our security scanner can also check to see if you have the most updated antivirus software. And we're always trying to improve our scanner, so please do send us feedback at scannerfeedback@zdtv.com. That makes sense. Don't go anywhere. We've got plenty more on the love bug worm. Details on the damages, victims, and suspects in our Cybercrime News and Review next.
Topping our look at news this week, the latest on the love bug investigation and damage. Authorities in the Philippines now say they have 4 suspects in the case, and more names may emerge next week. The names of suspects appeared on diskettes, which investigators seized this week from a flat in the Philippine capital. The diskettes had encrypted messages and 10 encoded names, which have been traced back to a computer school there. Technicians are expected to finish a report on the decoded diskettes Monday or Tuesday. Tens of millions of computers around the world are estimated to have been affected by the love bug, which is the worst virus since Melissa.
Nothing was fixed after Melissa. You now have your antivirus software will now scan for and identify Melissa. But the fundamental issues that made it possible haven't gone away, and they won't go away.
Onel de Guzman, a dropout from the computer school in Manila, says he might have accidentally transmitted the virus. The love bug destroys user files, steals passwords, and replicates itself through the user's address book. With the internet still reeling from the love bug, government and tech industry professionals met in Silicon Valley to develop a battle plan to defend the web. It was prompted by the White House call to the private sector to find ways to protect itself. Interpol, an international law enforcement agency, is asking governments of the world to work together to create uniform laws.
Hackers, and particularly young hackers, must be seen for what they are. They are criminals. They are committing criminal offenses which have consequences throughout the world. And they should be seen as that, not just clever young people.
The problem is so big, governments are saying it's no longer possible for them to provide the resources to adequately deal with cybercrime. Last year, the Federal Trade Commission handled about 50 complaints a day concerning internet scams, and the Securities and Exchange Commission says it gets up to 300 calls a day. Now the government has gone online to help victims of high-tech con artists. The Internet Fraud Complaint Center is run by the FBI and the National White-Collar Crime Center. Law enforcement says it's a one-stop shopping approach to fighting one of the biggest growth areas in crime.
We have stopped an estimated $250 million in deceptive sales to consumers. We have collected over $20 million in actual redress for consumers.
The government has also set up its own fake get-rich-quick sites to teach unsuspecting victims how not to fall into the net fraud web. Umlaut Industries is one of those sites. It doesn't really sell a Swedish miracle diet. When you click on the money bar, you're whisked away to a warning page with the familiar message, if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Napster has blocked access to some of the 335,000 users identified by the heavy metal band Metallica as having illegal copies of its songs available on the Internet. And in another setback for the online music trading site, a federal judge last week rejected Napster's claim that it's a mere conduit. Napster had claimed it was merely a service provider and was not liable for the actions of its users. Hotmail users are being warned about a new security flaw that could allow an outsider to tap into their accounts and read their email. The flaw is exploited by an HTML attachment. By clicking on the attachment, the file sends a copy of your cookie to the hacker. Since the cookies are then used for authentication, whoever receives them can then log into Hotmail as you. The Justice Department is deriding the proposals by Microsoft to remedy its antitrust violations, calling them ineffective and filled with loopholes. Microsoft had argued that breaking up the company is too severe a punishment. Here's what happens next. The government has until next Wednesday to formally respond to the documents filed by Microsoft. A week later, Judge Thomas Penfield Jackson has scheduled a hearing on the issue. In its filing, Microsoft proposed various timetables for how to proceed with the remedies phase of the case, saying the more extreme the remedy, the more time it will need to defend itself. Still ahead on Cybercrime.
When I found out that I was a victim of identity theft, I went into what you call post-traumatic stress disorder.
The Internet is becoming a new weapon in an old crime, identity theft. We have one woman's story plus tips on how you can avoid becoming a victim yourself. But first, take a guess at our cybercrime timeline. If you're a news buff, this one will be easy. David Smith, the author of the Melissa virus, is arrested. A magnitude 7.4 earthquake rocks Turkey, and King Hussein dies. Was it 1997, 1998, or 1999? We'll be back in 2 minutes.
Did you get the timeline this week? I bet you did. David Smith, the author of the Melissa virus, is arrested. A magnitude 7.4 earthquake rocks Turkey, and King Hussein dies. It all happened in 1999. But you knew that, didn't you? Well, here's something you might not know. Identity theft is among one of the fastest growing crimes in America, with nearly 500,000 new victims every year. And with the proliferation of the Internet, thieves now have a new tool to target victims. In this week's Cybercrime Consumer Alert, we introduce you to one woman who knows firsthand what it's like to have your identity stolen.
When someone gets their identity stolen, it is a total nightmare. It changed my life entirely. I mean, for a while there, I was really paranoid.
To this day, Mari Frank is still feeling the effects of having her identity stolen back in 1996. Thanks to the numerous fraud alerts on her credit, she still carries the first page of the police report in her wallet. And while the crime of identity theft is not new, the tool used to target the victim is the Internet.
My identity was stolen when a woman who I didn't even know had gone online and ordered my credit report. And she did this by working in a law office, pretending to be a private investigator, and really she was a paralegal. And she had access to the Internet. She had access to utilize the online services, the data dealers, and she was able to order my credit report.
A couple of clicks with the mouse, and that was all it took to assume the identity of Mari Frank.
Once she had my credit report, she had everything in front of her. She knew my date of birth. She knew all of the information about me, because on the credit header information on your credit report is your birthday, your social security number, your former names, your address, your unlisted phone numbers, and then it also has all of your credit cards.
What happened to Mari was, without a doubt, unfortunate but not uncommon. Greg Regan is a special agent in charge of financial crimes for the U.S. Secret Service. He says it's only natural the Internet is giving rise to this type of crime.
Identity theft is just growing with the Internet. As the expansion of the Internet grows, more commerce takes place in it. It only makes sense that more criminal activity would take place. And it does allow this anonymous ability for criminals to do it.
Before the proliferation of the Internet, dumpster digging was a common way to steal someone's identity. Thieves would go through people's trash cans looking for blank checks, credit card applications, junk mail. Well, thanks to cyberspace, people can get that same information online without having to dig through someone's trash. That may be one attraction, another is ease. Logging onto a computer is much easier than rifling through someone's trash.
More people are getting on the Internet. More people have access to this information. This information is cheap, and it's transmitted in a nanosecond.
But it can also be traced, and that's where the Secret Service comes in. In a special forensic crime lab in Washington, D.C., agents investigate financial crimes like online identity theft. The Internet may be the tool used to hijack the victim's information, but the thief usually creates a false credit card, driver's license, and/or social security card to pull off the crime. Larry Stewart, the lab's director, spends hours examining fake cards, looking for clues left in the signatures.
many of the people that are doing this crime on the internet are also using computers and computer printers to create the final document. So we have the ability here to identify from using the ink what type of computer printer was used. We can give them the make and model, for instance, and tell what type is being used to create the Social Security card and create the credit card or the traveler's check, whatever the document is.
While it's an effective method, this type of investigation is usually reserved for high-dollar cases like organized crime rings. When it comes to individual cases like Mari Frank, local law enforcement gets involved first.
I did the homework to find out where this person had gotten my information by looking at my credit report and then ordering the original application. I gave that to the police. They went out to the address that the cards were sent, and the only dumb thing she did is to actually go and live there. And so they were able to arrest her because she was on probation for shoplifting.
But that was in 1997, and laws against identity theft, both on and offline, were scant. In fact, before the Identity Theft Deterrence Act was passed in 1998, Mari Frank was not legally considered a victim. Credit card companies and banks were viewed as victims because the institutions assumed a significant part of any financial loss associated with the crime. The new law has helped change that, but
we're trying to address the issues that it's like having the Titanic with holes all over and you're just putting little fingers in it. That's what it's like. It's just overwhelming to deal with them.
Very interesting. What steps can you take to avoid being a victim?
Well, Alex, perhaps the most effective is also the simplest to do is let's use common sense. When you go to a website, read the privacy statement, read the fine print, know exactly how this website plans to use your personal information. And if you don't feel comfortable, don't give it out. And also make sure they're using the latest encryption software. Also, if you visit chat rooms, if you post things on message boards, don't leave your personal information. And an interesting point that Mari brought up in one of our conversations is that a lot of people are under the impression that if they don't use the internet, if they're not online, they can't be victims.
That is absolutely not the case.
True.
Right. In the real world, you have to take certain steps. You have to check your bills. You have to make sure that your mail's not just sitting out there. The things that happen in the real world translate to the virtual world.
Right. And it's the data dealers. They're rushing to get online like everyone else. So even if you're not personally putting your information on the web, it is still out there for other people. And on our website, we've put together some links that I think our users will find very useful. One is Mari's website, which is her Identity Theft Survival Kit. We've also got a link to the Privacy Rights Clearinghouse and the Secret Service, and that's all on cybercrime.com.
That is an excellent suggestion. Thank you very much. Cybercrime.com. Go there right after the show. Still ahead on Cybercrime.
The government isn't asking for either better citizenship on the internet or better security. What they're asking for is broad surveillance of our network.
Defense attorney Jennifer Granick takes a stand on trading freedom for security on the net in this week's Chaos Series. Welcome back. The C3 panel has come together. Nearly a dozen virtual panelists have signed on. C3, short for CyberCrime Connection. It's here to serve you to answer your cybercrime questions. So let's go to this week's question. This question comes from D.A. Mox. Sorry, that's all we got by way of a name. He or she writes, what are the crimes the Justice Department must obtain warrants for searching email? Sounds like a good thing to know. Well, we figured Internet lawyer Mark Bernstein from the Bernstein Law Group in San Francisco could help. D.A. Mox, here's his answer.
The Justice Department can get a search warrant for any email and it can be for any crime. It doesn't matter whether the person whose email it is the suspect in the crime or not. As long as they have probable cause to believe that the email will contain evidence of a crime, they can get a search warrant and search it.
Thanks, Mark. Take a gander at the C3 panel you helped us create so far. We're constantly adding new members like Chris Painter, former prosecutor in the Kevin Mitnick case. Check out the C3 panel on our site. You'll find it just below the security scanner. Oh, and here's what one of those fabulous cybercrime hacks looks like. It's yours if we use your email on the air. And hey, D.A. Mox, send us your address. We'll send you the hack. Last week, we met Jennifer Granick, the newest member of our C3 panel. Now, while we had her attention, I asked her whether she had a chaos theory of her own. She did, of course. And as a defense attorney to those charged with computer crimes, she has some very formed opinions about how the government spends money on Internet security. Here's Jennifer in this week's Chaos Theory.
Following the distributed denial of service attacks last January, Attorney General Janet Reno and FBI Director Louis Freeh told Americans that law enforcement was overwhelmed. Computer criminals were acting with impunity because law enforcement had neither the knowledge nor the expertise in order to catch them. But the government isn't asking for either better citizenship on the Internet or better security. What they're asking for is broad surveillance of our network. These are programs like FidNet, which would monitor your contacts with the government online, the SEC's proposal to scan the Internet for people who use phrases like get rich quick, and Digital Storm, which would help agents listen in on your telephone calls. This is the most expensive and not even the best way to look for criminals. The signal-to-noise ratio is too high. The criminal is a needle in the haystack of information collected about innocent people. What the government is asking us to do will make us no more safe, but will leave our privacy bleeding on the floor.
Now, Luke, as a former prosecutor, I know that you don't believe the government is spending all its time and all its money monitoring us.
Definitely not. Jennifer goes too far on this one. In my opinion, there are safeguards in place. One could get the impression that government agents are out there just on a whim violating your rights and getting access to this information. That's not really the case.
Well, I do believe that they abuse their power at times, but I will not go as far as Jennifer Granning.
Well, you've always been a man of good taste.
I always have.
And that brings us to an end of another episode of CyberCrime. We're glad you could join us. Be sure to watch us next week. Here's one of the stories that we're working on.
Online lead will greatly enhance law enforcement's ability to detect, imprison, and deter criminals.
It's a high-tech tool that traces guns. Next week on CyberCrime, see how online lead works and how law enforcement is using the program to identify gun traffickers.
That story and much more next week. I'll keep writing us. If you haven't already, the email address, cybercrime@zdtv.com. You can also chat with us on Mondays between 8 and 9 p.m.
And remember, you can always find more details on today's stories, plus late-breaking details on that love bug worm at our website. That's cybercrime.com. So long.